Will there be enough food to feed America in 50 years? My guest, an independent farmer, thinks maybe not because of big government and big business. I'm Holland Cook in Washington. The big picture is already grim for family farmers, and it could eventually be dire for those of us who like to eat. In colonial times, some 90% of our ancestors worked in agriculture. Locals produced what locals consumed. By the mid-1880s, the Homestead Act gave families land to farm, and railroads brought their goods to growing urban areas, and ocean transport fed American wheat to Europe. Conservation technique and the tractor were Industrial Revolution precursors to today's genetic engineering and other new tech tools. And all along, Uncle Sam tried to help. But my guest warns that we're long past the point where bigger is better. Doug Stephan is a lifelong independent farmer, and Doug is a broadcaster hosting the American Family Farmer radio show each weekend on stations across the USA, and you can hear it on iTunes. And Doug joins us from Boston. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Holland.
Hey, who is the American family farmer?
I'm the American family farmer. There are people who are older than I am, people who are younger than I am. There are a lot of women who are farmers now, youngsters, people that are coming along that never grew up on the farm but became fascinated by what they've learned about the potential to do things that are constructive, good, and healthy, and not necessarily on as much land as we used to do.
In many cases, a second or third generation family farm, right?
Well, there's not so much of that anymore, actually. There used to be much more of that, but because kids that grew up on the farm saw how hard their parents worked and what little they had to show for it, other than the land itself, they really have, in large part, left the farm. The kids growing up on the farm have left the farm to do other things, and now there's a new group that are going to school to actually learn how to farm. They're looking for land. They're the future farmers.
A herbivore eats plants. A carnivore eats meat. An omnivore eats anything. What is a locavore?
Locavores are the people who support the family farmers. The locavores are people who like to scrutinize what it is that they're eating by going to the farm. They want to pick the berries. They want to go out and look at the lettuce. They want to go see how big the cornfield is. They want to talk to the farmer. They want to know the farmer. Same thing is true in dairy. They want to go to the farm. They want to watch the cows being milked. They want to have their children experience what it's like to maybe take a tour of the farm. But they're ones who are very careful about knowing what they eat and where they get it.
Farm stand shoppers, more or less, right?
Yes, yeah, that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
well, just in time for Thanksgiving meal planning, upscale so-called fresh markets are touting organic produce. What does the term organic mean?
Depends on who you talk to. The government has made a mess of it, as they make a mess out of most things that they fiddle with. Organic is supposed to apply to things that don't have any connection to hormones, to the antibacterial things that are used sometimes, the things that you get from GMO foods, that kind of stuff, GMO feed. This is stuff that's pasture-fed if we're talking about cattle, but anything that doesn't have commercial fertilizers or chemicals of any sort involved in the growth.
Speaking of cattle, which you own on your farm, I've learned a new term. It is LFTB, lean, finely textured beef, also referred to as pink slime. Apparently, this is a beef byproduct treated with chemicals and then ground into ground beef. And about those GMOs you mentioned, genetically modified organisms, I'm sure you've seen the report just this week. The International Journal of Human Nutrition has reported on a study in which people who went on non-GMO diets got healthier. Apparently 28 different conditions, allergies, fatigue, heart problems. Does eating locally grown and raised stuff insulate us from fake food, or is even local produce and local livestock potentially tainted, fake, counterfeit, genetically engineered?
Well, I guess it depends on how you want to break it down. In terms of what you have, you used the term organic a minute ago. There's organic, there is natural, and there is local. Those are the terms that are often used to describe the various things that are available for people to choose from. In the main, what you want first is local. And that means that it's stuff that you've grown, the farmer has grown, let's say in that day he's produced it or picked it, so you can go and you know you're getting something that's fresh that day. Local usually equals freshest. In terms of the GMO and non-GMO, it depends on the preference of the farmer. And frankly, the way things are going now, it's almost impossible to find some seed varieties that aren't genetically modified. Monsanto and now Bayer and Dow and DuPont, they've gotten their hands into everything so that you can't find open pollinated seeds very easily. So if you want to avoid it, you got to be very vigilant. But you can avoid it, but sometimes it means that the stuff has to come from other places. It may be that your local growers can't find the non-GMO seeds unless they've just grown, kept seeds themselves over the years and regrow what they've been producing themselves. But it's harder and harder to find organic, pure, and local.
I see the little non-GMO sticker on stuff at the market. And, you talked about the stuff that's trucked in. I guess the free prize inside from eating local is that shipped in food didn't consume fossil fuel to get here. And how fresh can it be if that head of lettuce came from California to the East Coast?
Well, you make a good point, because when you think how it looks isn't necessarily how it is. You can go to a lot of the big name, supposedly fresh growers that spray water all over the lettuce and the spinach and the celery and the carrots, and so it all looks great. But from this time of year on until probably the end of April, or maybe sometime in that vicinity, the stuff that we eat, let's say in the Northeast, is coming from either Florida or California. 2-day trip from Florida, 3 to 4 day trip from California. Most of the sugars, most of the value, most of the nutrition in most anything that is shipped from other coasts depletes by 50% on the first day, 20-25% the second day. By the time you got it, it may have 10% of the nutritional value in it that it had before, but certainly it doesn't have full value by any stretch of the imagination.
You mentioned the spritzing at the high-end, fresh-type markets. And I have a conspiracy theory, is that it's got the crushed ice, the mist comes on every once in a while. Doesn't that actually add to the weight of the food? I mean, come on.
Of course it
Is
does.
the thumb on the scale here or what?
Right. Yeah, no, that's the old butcher trick. You put the thumb on the scale.
Yeah.
But no, of course, the water that's there adds, in the case of something that's light like romaine lettuce, some of the lighter, leafier vegetables, spinach, if you put water all over it, who knows? I mean, I haven't got any statistics, but I know that water is, in many instances, if you have a cup of it in your hand, you have a cup of let's say you put a cup of ground up spinach in one hand and a cup full of water in the other. The water is going to be way more than the spinach does, so yeah. You figure it out.
Well, and it might accelerate the rotting thereof, but as I say, these are just conspiracy theories. You talked about big ag. How is the big corporate ag business ganging up on the little guy like you?
Well, you can see examples of it everywhere. I'm a dairy guy, so I'll give you an example from the dairy perspective. I was milking a couple of hundred cows, and the amount of money that I was making was a pittance in comparison to what it takes to actually produce the milk. So I started selling raw milk on my farm at $11.50 a gallon, and even then it really didn't pay. A lot of there are specials this week at some of the high-end grocery stores. Organic milk for $7.50 is a Thanksgiving special. And people say, my God, how can that be worth that kind of money? I can buy a gallon of milk for $3.50. Well, you should know that if we'll take the $7 figure, okay? The farmer is lucky to get $2 out of that. So people say, Well, where does the rest of it go? The rest of it goes to the producer, to the trucker, there are at least 3 middlemen between when it leaves the farm and you buy it in the store. So the way that the accrual happens as far as the value of the milk, and I put that in quotation marks too, it doesn't go to the farmer. The farm guy should be getting 70% anyway, because without him you wouldn't have anything to sell. But the government has gotten so involved in pricing commodities, especially things like milk, that the farmer doesn't really have the ability to sell unless he produces and pasteurizes and or somehow or other bottles the milk himself and sells it him or herself. Otherwise, you see them. Dairy farms going out of business left and right. Massachusetts, when I was a kid, we had 600 dairy farms. Now Massachusetts has 116 dairy farms, as an example.
Are pesticides poisoning us?
Yes.
Ooh.
You want more?
Yeah, a little.
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes, they are. It's in everything, Holland. Everything. The stuff, it isn't, and not even in the food, the air that we breathe, the stuff that they spray around in large quantities everywhere, not just in the rural areas of the country, but all over the place. This stuff has penetrated. The things that you put, not to use this is a non-farm example, do you realize how noxious that stuff is they put on your lawn to make it green?
Ugh.
If you let your child go out and roll around in that after it's sprayed, you're taking the life of that child in your hands, or dogs. And that's the same stuff that they used to spray the corn that's grown in the field, or the lettuce and stuff. It's the same stuff.
Avoid Roundup, in other words, right?
Roundup and other things that are, in some circumstances, even more treacherous than Roundup. Roundup is bad stuff, but there's plenty of other. You got to read the label, and you know, in my circumstance, I used to weed the fields the old-fashioned way. It's called cultivation, not spraying everything all over the place.
Hey, what about? I got 30 seconds. What about soy milk, almond milk? What's up with that?
It's not milk. Milk comes from a cow. Milk comes from a goat. Milk comes from something that's alive. The almond may have been alive at one point in time, but you can't milk it, and you can't milk a soybean. So does that help you?
Spoken like a dairy farmer. Hey, happy Thanksgiving. Doug Stephan, the American Family Farmer. If you're a radio station, find out about this show at doug.farm. And if you want to hear it and it's not on a station near you, Doug is on iTunes. Thanks for stepping in to the big picture, Dougster.
My pleasure.
Coming up, the Thanksgiving minefield. An expert has tips for keeping peace at the dinner table. This is the big picture on RT America.